This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Asian refiners are beginning to switch to pricing U.S. crude oil purchases against global benchmark ICE Brent instead of Dubai after the Middle East marker spiked to record levels this month, three refining and trade sources said on Friday. The move could reduce liquidity for the Middle East benchmark in the derivatives market as traders shift hedges to ICE Brent, one of them said. Asian buyers have just begun booking U.S. crude cargoes for delivery in July this week, he said, adding that Japanese refiner Taiyo Oil bought 2 million barrels of U.S. light crude via a tender at about $19 a barrel above ICE Brent for July delivery. The Japanese refiner, which typically buys WTI crude pegged against Dubai prices, declined to comment.
India has slashed excise duties on petrol and diesel to protect consumers and curb a potential spike in inflation, while imposing windfall taxes on aviation fuel and diesel exports, amid volatile global oil markets due to the Iran war. Global oil prices have surged past $100 per barrel after the near closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which serves as a conduit for 40% of India's crude oil imports, since the US and Israel first struck Iran on February 28. In a government order late Thursday, India's finance ministry reduced the special excise duty on petrol to 3 rupees, $0.0318 per litre from 13 rupees. It also cut the duty on diesel to 0 from 10 rupees per litre.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
European Union finance ministers will seek to coordinate on Friday their response to the energy price surge due to the Iran war, ensuring that the measures aid the vulnerable and move Europe further away from fossil fuels, while keeping the fiscal cost and demand in check. Oil and gas prices have spiked since the US-Israeli strikes on Iran began on February 28, creating a price shock similar to the energy crisis Europe went through after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, even as EU countries are now getting a lot more energy from renewable sources. EU-level coordination is essential to prevent market fragmentation and leverage economies of scale, thereby reducing the overall need for intervention, the European Commission said in a note preparing the ministers' discussions.
Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak on Friday instructed the Energy Ministry to draft a resolution banning gasoline exports from April 1, the Russian government said. The state-run TASS news agency earlier reported that the ban would remain in place until July 31. Novak said that turmoil in the global oil and oil products market, caused by the crisis in the Middle East, is leading to significant price fluctuations. At the same time, the high demand for Russian energy resources in foreign markets remains a positive factor, he added. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Democratic Republic of Congo and China have signed a deal to deepen cooperation in the African nation's mining sector, Congo's government said, as global powers jockey for influence in the strategically important minerals powerhouse. Congo is the world's leading producer of cobalt and holds vast reserves of copper, lithium, coltan, and other battery metals. Chinese companies led by top cobalt miners CMOC, Zijin and Huayu already dominate its mining sector. And Beijing is also Congo's biggest bilateral creditor. However, the United States and other countries seeking supplies of the minerals needed for electric vehicle manufacturing and the energy transition are also courting Kinshasa.
India will hold talks with Argentina, Indonesia and Oman next month as it seeks to boost supplies of steelmaking raw materials such as coking coal and iron ore, and access technology, two sources with direct knowledge told Reuters. The talks are expected to begin next month at a global steel summit, described by the Indian government as the country's largest international conference cum exhibition, said the sources who did not wish to be identified as the plan was not yet public. India, the world's biggest crude steel producer after China, relies on ferronickel imports for stainless steel manufacturing, with Indonesia holding the world's largest nickel ore reserves.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Chicago soybean futures ticked lower on Friday following the White House announcement of revised U.S. biofuel targets earlier in the afternoon. The news prompted profit-taking as many traders had already bought soybean futures expecting bullish news. Wheat and corn spent the day seesawing amid uncertainty over the Iran war, with corn also pressured by pre-weekend technical selling.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.